Screen enclosures are super popular when it comes to chameleon keeping, but one of the biggest challenges with screen enclosures is figuring out how to attach branches. We know chameleons need branches, but how do you add them to this screen enclosure without puncturing hole or damaging the enclosure? So I'm going to be walking you guys through how I built this enclosure using only two things: fishing line and zip ties. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So my preference is to use only natural branches and live plants. I don't like to use the mossy vines or fake vines or hammocks or fake plants or anything like that. I try to keep it as safe and naturalistic as possible for my chameleons. So for this particular enclosure, I ended up using natural branches from a birch tree. There's tons of different trees that are safe for your chameleon, but the biggest thing is making sure that they are not a sap producing tree, because the sap can be an irritant for the chameleons for obvious reasons. I personally wash all of my branches with just soap and water. I do this in my shower, scrub them and let them air dry. A lot of people will go another level up. They'll use bleach or vinegar, or they'll bake their branches. But when you're working with a 4-foot tall enclosure, sometimes those branches don't fit inside of your oven. So I did all of that beforehand before I even started building out the enclosure, so then I had a bunch of different branches to choose from. When you're picking your branches from outside, make sure they're not too thick. Keep in mind, we want our chameleon's foot to be able to grip around the branch, and if they're too thick, that's going to be difficult for their teeny little foot to do that. So I like to have some that are a little bit thicker to be kind of my anchor branches, and then I'll have some thinner ones to be my highway branches. So first thing I did with the enclosure, and this is the Zoom It XL Repti Breeze, which has the reputation of being a pretty flimsy enclosure, honestly. So I was a little bit nervous of how I was going to do all this, but I wanted to challenge myself to not use any sort of like ledges, because like these have the dragon strand ledges, which are super awesome, but I know not everyone has those. So I wanted to challenge myself to build out this enclosure just using zip ties and fishing line. Okay, so the two main things that you'll need are fishing line. What do they call this? Superior tensile. Anyways, fishing line and zip ties. I like to get the brown ones. These are linked on my Amazon store, so then they kind of blend in with the branches. So, and then probably an extra set of hands. That was a lot easier for me than to do it by myself. So the first step in all this is to have 4 branches that are the height of the enclosure, just slightly shorter, so then they're not poking through the top. So 4 of them, and I just take them and just like snap them on my leg, honestly, to break them. But if you have like a saw, then I guess that would work too, but I don't. So what I do is I put them in all 4 corners. These are going to be like your anchor branches. These are going to be the weight-bearing, supportive branches for the enclosure, so you're not actually attaching any of the branches to the screen. I just used the fishing line for that and just took a piece of it, about yay big, cut it, and then tied it like 3 times around the branch. And so what I did was just thread the fishing line through the mesh, because it's small enough to go through the mesh. You could also use floral wire or whatever else you think would work through that, and then tied it around the branch and secured it that way. I would do it in like the top, middle, and the bottom, so in at least 3 different places it's secured, anchored, and have that be flush up against the metal framing, which is going to be more supportive than just the mesh itself. So once you get those anchors in place, then the next most important branch is going to be your basking branch. This is going to be the branch that goes right underneath your basking bulb, hence its name. And this is the area where you need to make sure that's the appropriate temperature. Most basking branches are 4 to 6 inches away, but that's going to be dependent on the size of your chameleon and the wattage of heat bulb that you use. But you want to make sure that this is the appropriate temperature for your species. And I did a whole video on heat bulbs, basking temperatures, all that good stuff, so feel free to check that out if you're interested. But once that basking branch is done, then it's just a matter of filling in the highways. Remember, these branches are the best way for your chameleon to move around, and any empty space is unused space. So you want to make sure you have a variety of horizontal branches, diagonal branches. I try not to put many vertical branches because chameleons just tend to move side to side versus directly up and down, but a variety of branches, and then I typically will add in some plants along the way. Once my plants are in, then I can go back in and fill in empty gaps and stuff with the remaining branches. So for this enclosure, I counted. I ended up using 25 branches. Obviously, the size of the branch makes a difference, the plants that you're using, but just so you guys have an idea for when you're branch hunting, like just how many branches that you need for your chameleon enclosure. The best way I found to attach the branches is just using zip ties. I just wrap them around, cinch them, and then just will clip the remaining bit, and then I will rotate that piece so then any pokey bits are behind and not something that your chameleon could snag themselves on or potentially cut themselves. And I end up using a bunch of zip ties throughout all of this, but you just want to make sure they're secure. I always do a little test, can't support the weight. I will try to, attach little branches to bigger branches and make sure there's a variety of things inside there for my chameleon to feel safe and secure and have lots of things to climb on. If you don't do this, then there's a high likelihood that your chameleon will climb the screen, which can be problematic, and then they can rip out their nails and they won't grow back. Neptune did that as a baby. So I just try to give a word of caution to all you guys to make sure you give your chameleon lots of things to climb on. So you guys have it. That's how I attached all of my branches inside this enclosure. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave me any questions or comments down below. Let me know what you use to attach your branches. All my other enclosures have been with dragon strand ledges, which are awesome. But let me know down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. You can follow Neptune and all of my chameleons on social media at Neptune the Chameleon. I've got my merch links down below, Patreon discount links, video consulting if you want to chat one-on-one with me. All that is always linked down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! God bless America. At least or any force.